with a grateful heart, give thanks to the Holy One.
Genesis 40. Some time later, both the senior security advisor to the king of Egypt and his head chef offended their master, Egypt's king. Pharaoh was so angry with his two officers, his senior security advisor and his head chef, that he locked them up in the prison dungeon operated by the captain of the guard, the very place where Joseph was imprisoned. The captain of the guard entrusted them to Joseph's custody, who took care of them, since they were to remain there in custody for a number of days. Then the two of them each had a dream. They both had their dreams the same night, and there were separate interpretations for each dream, the senior security advisor and the head chef to the king of Egypt, who had confined them in prison. When Joseph came to see them in the morning, he noticed how downcast they looked. They were both very sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers, who were with him in prison in his master's house, "Why are you so sad today?" "We had a dream," they replied, "but there's no one to interpret it." "Interpretations belong to God," Joseph told them, "so please tell me your stories." So the senior security advisor related his dream to Joseph. "In my dream," he said, "all of a sudden there was a vine in front of me. On the vine were 3 branches that budded. Blossoms shot out, and clusters grew up that produced ripe grapes. Then, with Pharaoh's cup in my hand, I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, then handed the cup directly to Pharaoh. Then Joseph told him, 'This is what your dream means, the 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will encourage you and return you to your responsibilities. You'll attend to Pharaoh's personal wine cup, just as you did when you were his senior security advisor. But keep me in mind when things go well for you. Be sure to extend kindness to me by remembering me to Pharaoh. Bring me out of this prison, because I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews. Not only that, I haven't done anything that deserves me being confined to this pit.' When the head chef heard that the interpretation was good, he told Joseph, 'I was also in my dream. All of a sudden, there were 3 baskets with white bread stacked on top of my head. There was all kinds of food in the basket that was on top, including baked food for Pharaoh. The birds were eating them from the basket on my head.' Joseph replied, 'This is what your dream means, the 3 baskets are also 3 days. Within 3 more days, Pharaoh will behead you and hang you on gallows, where birds will eat your flesh from you. On the 3rd day, which just happened to be Pharaoh's birthday, he threw a party for all his servants. He lifted the head of both his senior security advisor and of his head chef in front of his servants, that is, he restored his senior security advisor to his former responsibilities, including attending to Pharaoh's personal wine cup, but he beheaded and hanged the head chef, just as Joseph had interpreted for them. Despite all of this, the senior security advisor not only didn't remember Joseph, he deliberately forgot him.
Give thanks thanks to the Holy One.
Genesis 41. 2 years later, to the day, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile River, when all of a sudden 7 healthy, plump cows emerged from the Nile to graze in the grass that grew in the reeds that lined the bank. Right after that, 7 more cows came up out of the Nile. Ugly and gaunt, they stood next to the other cows on the bank of the Nile River. But all of a sudden they ate up the 7 healthy, plump cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. After he had fallen back to sleep, he had a second dream, in which 7 ears of plump, fruit-filled grain grew up on a single stalk. Suddenly 7 thin ears of grain that had been scorched by an east wind sprouted up right after them and ate up the 7 plump, fruit-filled ears. Then Pharaoh woke up a second time, and it had been a very vivid dream. The very next morning, he was frustrated about the dream, so he sent word to summon all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them what he had dreamed, but no one could interpret them. Then Pharaoh's senior security advisor spoke up. "Maybe I should make a confession." When Pharaoh was angry with some of his servants, he incarcerated me in custody of the captain of the bodyguard, along with Pharaoh's head chef. We each had a dream on the same night, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a Hebrew young man incarcerated with us, who was also working as a servant to the captain of the bodyguard. We each related our dreams, and then he interpreted them for us. He provided specific meanings for each of our dreams. And what he interpreted for each of us came true. Pharaoh restored me to my responsibilities, but he executed the other man. Pharaoh sent word to summon Joseph quickly from the dungeon, so they shaved his beard, changed his clothes, and then sent him straight to Pharaoh. "I've had a dream," Pharaoh told Joseph, "but nobody can interpret it." "I've heard that you can interpret dreams." "I can't do that," Joseph replied, "but God is concerned about Pharaoh's well-being." So Pharaoh told Joseph, "In my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and all of a sudden 7 healthy, plump, beautiful cows emerged from the Nile and began to graze among the reeds that line the bank. Just then, 7 other cows emerged after them, poor, ugly, and appearing very gaunt in their flesh. I've never seen anything as ugly as those cows anywhere in the entire land of Egypt. But those thin, gaunt cows gobbled up the first 7 healthy cows. Not only that," Pharaoh continued, "after they had finished devouring the cows, nobody could tell that they had gobbled them up, because they were just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. Later, I also dreamed about 7 plump, fruit-filled ears of grain that grew up out of a single stalk. All of a sudden, 7 thin, withered ears of grain, scorched by the east wind, sprouted up after them. But the thin ears gobbled up the 7 good ears." I told all this to my advisors, but nobody was able to explain it to me. "Pharaoh's dreams are identical," Joseph replied. God has told Pharaoh what he is getting ready to do. The 7 healthy cows represent 7 years, as do the 7 healthy ears. The dreams are identical. The 7 gaunt cows that arose after the healthy cows are 7 years, as are the 7 gaunt ears scorched by the east wind. There will be 7 years of famine. So the message that I have for Pharaoh is that God is telling Pharaoh what he is getting ready to do. Be advised that 7 years of phenomenal abundance are coming throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them 7 years of famine are ahead, during which all of the abundance will be forgotten throughout the land of Egypt. The famine will ravage the land so severely that there will be no surplus in the land due to the coming famine, because it will be very severe. Now since Pharaoh had that dream twice, it means that this event has been scheduled by God, and God will bring it to pass very soon. Therefore let Pharaoh select a wise, discerning person to place in charge over the land of Egypt. Also, let Pharaoh immediately proceed to appoint supervisors over the land of Egypt, who will collect 1/5 of its agricultural production during the coming 7 years of abundance. Let them collect all the food during the coming fruitful years, store up the grain in cities governed by Pharaoh's authority, and place it under guard. Let the food be kept in reserve to feed the land for the 7 years of famine that will occur throughout Egypt, so the people don't die during the famine. What Joseph proposed pleased Pharaoh and all of his advisors, so Pharaoh asked his servants, "Can we find anyone else like this, someone in whom the Spirit of God lives?" Since God has revealed all of this to you, Pharaoh told Joseph, "There is no one so wise and discerning as you. So you are to be appointed in charge over my palace, and all of my people are to do whatever you command them to do. Only the throne will have greater authority than you. Look." Pharaoh confirmed to Joseph, "I put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand, placed it on Joseph's hand, had him clothed in fine linen garments, and placed a gold chain around his neck. Then he provided him with a chariot as his second in command, outfitted with a group of people who shouted out in front of him, "Bow your knees." And that's how Pharaoh set Joseph over the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh also told Joseph, "I'm still Pharaoh, but without your permission nobody in all of the land of Egypt will so much as lift up their hands or take a step." Pharaoh also changed Joseph's name to Zephinath-Paneah and gave Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On, to him as his wife. And that's how Joseph gained authority over the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he began to serve Pharaoh, king of Egypt, by traveling throughout the land of Egypt, independent from Pharaoh's oversight. While bumper crops grew during the 7 abundant years, Joseph collected the surplus food throughout the land of Egypt, storing food in cities, that is, he gathered the food from fields that surrounded every city and stored it there. Joseph stored up so much grain, like sand on the seashore in so much abundance, that he stopped keeping records because it was proving to be impossible to measure how much they were gathering. Before the years of famine arrived, Joseph fathered 2 sons with Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn son Manasseh because, he said, God has made me forget all of my hard life and my father's house. He named his second son Ephraim because, he said, God has made me fruitful in the land of my troubles. As soon as the 7 years of abundance throughout the land of Egypt ended, the 7 years of famine started, just as Joseph had predicted. It was an international famine, but there was food everywhere throughout the land of Egypt. Eventually, the land of Egypt began to feel the effects of the famine, so the people cried out to Pharaoh for food. "Go see Joseph," Pharaoh announced to all the Egyptians, "and do whatever he tells you to do." Joseph opened all of the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, because the famine was beginning to be severe throughout the land of Egypt. In addition, all of the surrounding nations came to Joseph to buy grain from Egypt, because the famine had become severe throughout the world.
Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One.
Genesis 42. Eventually, Jacob observed that there was grain in Egypt, so he asked his sons, "Why do you keep on staring at one another? Pay attention now. I've heard that there is grain in Egypt, so go down there and buy some grain for us, so we can live, instead of dying." So 10 of Joseph's brothers left to buy grain from Egypt. Jacob would not send Joseph's brother Benjamin to accompany them, because he was saying, "I'm afraid that he'll come to some kind of harm." Israel's sons went in a caravan that included others who were going to Egypt to buy grain, because the famine pervaded the land of Canaan, too. Meanwhile, Joseph continued to be ruler over the land, in charge of selling to everyone in the land. Joseph's brothers appeared and bowed down to him, face down. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he knew who they were, but he remained disguised and asked them gruffly, "Where are you from?" "From the land of Canaan," they replied. "We're here to buy food." But Joseph had already recognized his brothers, even though they had not recognized him. Furthermore, Joseph remembered the dreams that he had about them. So he accused them, "You're spies. You've come here to spy on our undefended territories." "No, Your Majesty," they replied. "Your servants have come here to buy food. We're all sons of a common father. We're honest men, Your Majesty. We're not spies." But Joseph kept insisting, "It's just as I've said, you've come here to spy on our unguarded territories." "But Your Majesty," they pleaded, "your servants include 12 brothers, the sons of a common father back in the land of Canaan. Please. Our youngest brother remains with our father, and the other one is no longer alive." "I'm right," Joseph insisted. "Just as I said, you're spies. So here's how we'll test you. You can bet the life of Pharaoh that you're not leaving here until your youngest brother comes here." one of you is to be sent back so he can get your brother while the rest of you remain in custody. That way, we'll test whether or not you're telling the truth. If you're not, as surely as the Pharaoh leaves, you're spies." Then Joseph locked them all together in prison for 3 days. 3 days later, Joseph told them, "I fear God, so do this and you'll leave. If you're honest men, leave one of your brothers here in custody, then the rest of you can leave and take some grain with you to alleviate the famine that's affecting your households. Just be sure to bring your youngest brother back to me so what you've claimed can be verified. That way, you won't die." "We're all guilty because of what we did to our brother," they told each other. "We kept on watching his suffering while he pleaded with us. We're in this mess because we wouldn't listen. Didn't I tell you?" Reuben replied. "Don't wrong the kid." "I said, but would you listen?" "No. Now it's payback time." Meanwhile, they had no idea that Joseph could understand them, since he was talking to them through an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep. When he returned, he spoke with them, but then he took Simeon away from them and had him placed under arrest right in front of them. After this, Joseph gave orders to fill up their sacks with grain, to return each man's money to his own sack, and to supply each of them with provisions for their return journey. All of this was done for them. Then they each mounted up, their donkeys having been loaded with grain, and left from there. Later on, one of them opened up his sack to give his donkey some fodder after they had stopped at the place where they intended to lodge for the night. There, in the mouth of his sack, was all of his money. He reported to his brothers, "My money has been returned. It's right here in my sack." Trembling with mounting consternation, each of them asked one another, "What is God doing to us?" As soon as they had returned to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him everything that had happened to them. "The man who was in charge of the land spoke harshly to us," they said. "He accused us of being spies. But we told him, 'No. We're honest men. We're not spies. Our father has 12 sons, but one of us isn't alive anymore, and our youngest brother is with our father today back home in Canaan.' But the man who was in charge of the land responded, 'I'm going to test your honesty. Leave one of your brothers with me, take some grain for the famine that's afflicting your households, and leave. But bring your youngest brother back to me so I can be sure that you're honest men, and not spies. Then I'll return your brother to you, and you'll be allowed to trade anywhere in the land.'" Later on, as they went about unloading their sacks, each man's bundle of money was found in each man's sack. When they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were greatly distressed. Their father Jacob told them, "You're causing me to lose my children. Joseph is gone. Now Simeon is gone, and you're planning to take Benjamin, too. Everything's going against me. Feel free to put my own 2 sons to death." Reuben responded to his father, if I don't bring him back to you. Trust me, I'll bring him back to you." But Jacob replied, "My son isn't going back with you, since his brother is dead and he's the only one left. If something should harm him as you travel, then it'll be death for me and my sad, gray hair."
Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks. We give thanks to